Welcome to This Explainer. All right, I want you to just close your eyes for a second. Picture a beautifully manicured green. You're standing right over a crucial putt. You strike the ball, it tracks flawlessly on the absolute perfect line, and then, agonizingly, it dies just a single inch short of the cup. Ugh, it's a gut-wrenching feeling, right? But today, we're actually going to explore how that exact heartbreaking scenario is a pretty profound metaphor for the rest of our lives. So, this brings us to what is arguably golf's oldest physical truth, and it was cemented way back in 1905 by a guy named Harry Vardon. His rule was brutally simple: never up, never in. And look, the math on this is undefeated. A ball that stops short of the hole literally has a 0% chance of going in. But one that runs past, well, at least you gave the hole a chance. Okay, so let's really dive into this. If leaving an effort short guarantees failure, why do we, as humans, so naturally pull back? Why do we completely refuse to fully commit when the stakes are high? I mean, whether that's sinking a putt, launching a new business, or just trying to learn a totally new skill. What's holding us back? Well, to understand this, let's look at the man behind the maxim. Harry Vardon wasn't exactly born into privilege. He was actually a poor kid from the Isle of Jersey, just scraping by as a caddy and a greenkeeper. And yet, against all odds, he transformed himself into golf's very first global superstar. We're talking a staggering 6 Open championships and the 1900 US Open. And Vardon achieved all of this by completely shedding the heavy armor of traditional play. So, instead of the flat, stiff swings that all his peers were using, he invented this smooth, upright swing and an overlapping grip that connected the hands as one single unit. That grip, the Vardon grip, is literally still used by 90% of professional players today. He absolutely wasn't afraid to break the mold and look a little foolish to achieve mastery. So, why do the rest of us pull our punches? The author of the newsletter we're exploring today, who we affectionately call Papa, grounds this perfectly in what we'll call Papa's take. He points out that we leave putts short simply because we are paralyzed by the fear of the return putt. We are terrified of blasting that ball way past the hole and having to face a really difficult, embarrassing comeback. And this beautifully captures the tension of our daily lives. On the one hand, a weak stroke driven by fear protects our fragile egos, sure, but it absolutely guarantees failure. On the other hand, full execution means pushing that fear totally aside. It means accepting that you might just blast the ball right past the hole. Ultimately, it's that fear of looking foolish that fundamentally blocks us from ever reaching our target. Let's step off the golf course for a minute and head into the realm of cognitive science. Scholars actually call this fear the beginner paradox. It's this fascinating reality that the exact condition we spend all of our energy trying to avoid, the embarrassment, the shaking hands, the total clumsiness of being a novice, is actually the only doorway through which real skill can enter. And this isn't just some modern theory. It spans centuries. Back in 1970, Shunryu Suzuki wrote about the Zen concept of shoshin, which translates to beginner's mind. See, in the beginner's mind, there are just endless possibilities. But in the expert's mind, that expertise often hardens into rigid assumption, and it quietly closes the door to any new insights. Stripping away that protective armor of experience, it makes us feel incredibly vulnerable. We feel totally exposed. But honestly, that open, hungry beginner's mind, the mind that's actually willing to hit the ball past the hole and look a bit foolish, is literally our only defense against becoming rigid and obsolete. The roots of this actually go even deeper into Western philosophy. Socrates famously believed that his wisdom consisted entirely of just knowing what he didn't know. The Greeks called this aporia. It's that puzzled, super uncomfortable impasse you hit when your comfortable assumptions just collapse. But far from being a bad thing, this feeling of not knowing is the crucial spark that pushes us to inquire and to grow. And modern learning science totally backs up this ancient wisdom. The Dreyfus model maps out our journey perfectly. We literally all start as rigid, rule-bound novices, and we are forced to trudge through a deeply awkward middle phase before we ever get to taste intuitive expertise. Starting out as a helpless, clumsy novice isn't some defect in the process. It is the required process. The renowned psychologist Anders Ericsson proved this with his concept of deliberate practice. Doing the exact same comfortable thing for 20 years doesn't magically make you an expert. True growth only happens out on the frontier, at the absolute edge of your ability, which, of course, happens to be the exact place where you feel most like an embarrassing beginner. Robert Bjork actually gave this a scientific name: desirable difficulties.
Look, when learning feels perfectly smooth and easy, it's usually just a comforting illusion. The conditions that slow you down and increase your errors are what actually forge durable memories. That pounding heart and that hot flush of embarrassment, that is simply a desirable difficulty manifesting in emotional form.
Now, the exact opposite of this vulnerability is actually really dangerous. Think about the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people lack skill but also completely lack the awareness to even realize it. The worst possible place to be is the falsely confident novice who just refuses to feel embarrassment. If you can still feel that awkwardness, congratulations, you are awake. You're getting honest, accurate feedback from the world. Which brings us right back to Papa's take. As Papa wisely points out, even the absolute greatest athletes in the world maintain a beginner's mindset. They are completely unafraid to look awkward while they're trying out a new technique. Powering through that initial sting of embarrassment, that is the mandatory toll you have to pay on the long road to mastery. So when we synthesize these two worlds, the pristine putting greens of Harry Vardon and the cognitive science behind the beginner paradox, we see the exact same mental muscle at work. Committing fully to a terrifying putt and committing fully to learning a new skill both require you to willingly and bravely walk right through that doorway of clumsiness. So what exactly should we take away from this explainer today? Well, first, recognize when you are pulling your punches just because you fear that return putt. Second, actively cultivate shoshin. Stay open and fiercely curious. Third, don't run from the struggle. Intentionally seek out those desirable difficulties. And finally, boldly embrace the doorway of clumsiness. Remember, absolutely every expert you admire was once a rigid, rule-bound novice. The path runs straight through the awkward middle. You start weak because there is literally no other way. Your willingness to look foolish for a short season is the ultimate price of admission for looking highly capable for a lifetime. I'm going to leave you with this final, incredibly powerful thought from Papa. You must commit fully if you hope to succeed at life. So, ask yourself today, where in your own life are you holding back? What putts are you leaving short just because you're afraid to look foolish? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.